we ended up finding the guy, and he was part of like a huge ring that was stealing people's credit cards. And we ended up bringing the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it was like, I don't know how many people, 10, 15, 20 people that we took down, all because this guy took one credit card from the wrong person.
Hey guys, it's Joey Chanel with Sippin and Selling, and today's guest is my friend Ryan Malkin from Malkin Law. We both celebrated our birthdays yesterday, which I find to be so funny. I've never met another Mayday baby. Happy birthday, Ryan.
Thank you. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, thanks. I brought you a little something since we're sharing birthdays. Here's a little gift.
Thank you, and I brought you something as well.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Oh, I love hats. I'm going to put it on right now. A nice represent Malkin Law. Get a nice zoom on there, Chris. Love this hat. Love it. Oh, I got to tuck the ears. Got to look very cute. Okay. Yes, let's get started. What a fun birthday. I got an extra gift the day after. I mean, it's all about the relationships. I'm lucky that I know you. Thank you. So Ryan, I wanted to invite you on the show today because you are in a very important space in our industry. You know, you're in charge of a lot of big time clients, contracts in the beverage alcohol space, also now in the cannabis space, which is very exciting and something new and innovative in our industry. I want you to dive into how you got started in law and then into the beverage alcohol space. I don't know your backstory. I don't know if you started in that space or if you just were in law in a different area. So can you please talk to us about that?
Yeah, for sure. So after undergrad, I actually went to New York and I was a writer for Smart Money magazine, and I did a lot of freelance writing for like Beverage Media and Sante, Liquor.com, and other publications in kind of the beverage space. I also did a lot of interviews for like DJ Times and club magazines and things like that. So I had no intention really initially of being a writer, of being a lawyer, but I love writing. And after several years of writing, I realized that a lot of the editors and the older people were really not making any money.
Right.
So I was like, all right, well, let me go to law school at night. So I went to law school at night and kept working during the day, thinking I was going to be a publisher of a magazine or, review the articles for First Amendment and other, libel things. And I ended up getting really sidetracked in law school and loved criminal law.
Love it.
So after several years of writing and finishing law school, I ended up going to the Manhattan DA's office. And all through that time, I kept writing freelance all about the alcohol industry. So I would do roundups, the best new, whiskey. Absinthe was on the rise at the time, so like what's happening with that, rum roundups, what have you. So I really got into the industry from the business side of it and the PR side of it in terms of writing and learning about it. And I went on press trips, which were awesome. So I just loved the alcohol industry. And after being at the DA's office for like 5-6 years, I thought it was time for a change. And I ended up getting a job at Pernod Ricard USA as an attorney. So I went there after that.
Let's pause. I mean, that's a big deal. And for those of you that don't know who Pernod Ricard is, why don't we tell them listening some of the brands that maybe they have or have not experienced out in the world? There's some big ones.
Yeah, they're the largest, second largest spirit supplier in the world. So they own like Malibu, Glenlivet, Jameson, Perrier-Jouet, Chivas,
to name a few.
Yeah. So the list goes on. So it was a great job, and I loved working there. And one of my responsibilities was traveling the country and training the sales team on what they can and cannot do in their states, in addition to reviewing like the advertising and marketing for some of the brands. So I really learned a lot about basically like, all of the different state laws, as well as, best practices for advertising, marketing, and trade practices. And then when I moved to Miami about 11 years ago, that's when I started my practice on my own. And I was bringing, big supplier legal knowledge and expertise to a lot of brands who, didn't have that expertise and didn't really know, even what best practices were and sometimes even what trade practices were.
Understood. I mean, there's so much that goes into bringing a brand to market. We've talked a little bit about it on my show before, and we've touched on some points. I think that we've come a long way since Prohibition. We definitely have some things that we could work on. Some of the issues that I feel like come across most brands are when they're getting into markets we call control states. I feel like that's something where there's you add value for sure for people that are just coming out with a brand that's a startup, or even ones that just didn't want to tap into those markets because there's so many different rules. And then obviously there's Texas, and we've got the 3-tier system. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you about with clients, I find that I'm navigating and trying to strategically go into that marketing that you touched on to do something innovative and unique to still move bottles off the shelf, is dry states. So I've got some clients that, aren't in 100% dry states, but some chains like Total Wine in California, they don't allow us to sample spirits. They can do wine, they can do beer, but we can't sample spirits. So I have to get creative. We'll spray the bottle in an atomizer like perfume on a napkin and then hand it off to, the customers, and they'll smell it. Great for a product like Chinola that was a passion fruit liqueur, but not great for vodkas or, something that isn't going to have a flavor. I don't know if that happens to pertain to any of the contracts or the clients that you're talking to in route to strategy with market, or if you are kind of out of that, because for me that's a marketing strategy, right? I think you grazed past that, but does that also happen to do you have ideas with your clients that you bring to the table to do unique strategies like I'm doing with the atomizer? Do you talk to them maybe just about putting together contracts with celebrity endorsements or other things that make sense? I bring it up because that's how we got to know each other, right? We went to an event, one of your clients, I don't know if you want to name names or not, but nice celebrity client brand, bourbon. And that's why it's in my mind. I was curious if you think that strategies like bringing on a celebrity is helpful, or if you think that brands should, only do that maybe a couple years later into their build process. What do you think?
So you have a lot there. I definitely get involved in the marketing side to some extent when people ask, largely, and then I'm freely share my ideas. And even when they don't ask, sometimes I'm like, hey, well, if you did this, then it would be compliant. So it's usually in the context of they come up with an idea, because I'd like to start from the position of just tell me what you want to do, and I'll tell you largely how to get there. So they're like, here's what we want to do. And I'm like, okay, well, we can do that if we do X, Y, and Z. So yes, because I see so much and have seen so much across a number of different clients and throughout the years, I can usually come up with some compliant version of what they want to do and provide a risk analysis and say, let's do this instead of that, and then we should be good.
Okay.
And as it relates to the celebrity products, well, one thing on the non-alc tastings,
Okay.
it lends itself well to coffee products. So that's an easy one, right? Because you could just serve coffee. But
Okay.
for non-coffee flavored, very strong flavored like Chinola, yeah, you're right. It's
tough,
definitely a
right? And you have
challenge.
to get very creative. And if you don't have maybe the marketing dollars, or if you don't have enough of a footprint where you can get end cap displays or something, what I try to do to get creative is partner with a brand. So I like to have, these relationships that maybe they're not a partner in my portfolio, but I like to tag on brands to a sparkling wine product that can be served, or a non-alcoholic product like a Fever Tree Q, that sort of thing. Obviously free AF, that's what I have in my book. So I try to get creative, but I wanted to go back to the celebrity because, like I said, that's where we got to spend a lot of time and get to know each other. And me personally, I do have celebrity brands in my book, and people are always asking me, like, does that make a difference? Does that move the needle? In a state like California, it does, because people can just show up because they see that this person's going to be there signing bottles and giving it away, and they're not allowed to open it up to taste it. But how often are the celebrities showing up, right? So
I think it depends greatly. And so the brand you're talking about, I can't talk about it. It's Brothers Bond. And we met through Ian Somerhalder, they started the brand, Ian and Paul, and they're very, very active. And I think that's a great example of people who have done it kind of right. Whereas other brands and we work with a lot of celebrity brands, but you see sometimes the celebrities sort of, their name's associated with, but they don't really do anything. And then I think oftentimes the consumer can kind of feel that. And it's like, well, sometimes people will buy it, right? Obviously, there's like the diehard fans that might buy it initially. But I think that the involvement over time helps, and the engagement over time, and using social media. And the celebrities typically have a bigger social media follower than the brand itself. So to the extent that the celebrity can, push things out on their own and engage people, I think that helps a lot. And I also think it helps if if the celebrity goes on distributor ride-alongs, or if a distributor has a big win, then they FaceTime the rep. So I think there's a lot that the celebrity can do that's like even above and beyond the consumer side that maybe people don't see, but like you and I would see, that does impact the brand, and especially who their customers directly, the distributor, getting those guys involved and really pushing the brand.
I agree. I feel like I do that with a lot of my clients. It just gives a special touch, at the end of a win. It's nice to get an email or a text with a video that's personalized. I think it goes a long way. I know I would be excited about it. I always could talk about celebrity endorsements. I know there's been some bad ones. I know there's some that feel, disingenuous, like you're saying.
Well, I think there's a difference between a celebrity spokesperson or endorsement and then the celebrity who actually started or is involved with a brand or even takes over a brand, right? Like Ryan Reynolds.
Right.
He didn't start aviation. It was, Tom Mooney and House, but then he bought in through later, but obviously took it to a different place. So I think it depends if the celebrity is an owner or actually like a stakeholder and really, driving it, or they just hire them as a spokesperson to do a couple posts. And so I think there's definitely a big difference. They both could help for different reasons, but I think there's just a difference in terms of, what the celebrity's involvement is and how the brand's going to position itself.
Understood. So with Malkin Law, if someone in your portfolio has a celebrity of interest, is that something that you would draft up an agreement for, or how does it work? What would they use your practice for?
So we get involved in different ways. Sometimes the brand will come to us and say, hey, we have celebrity, X who's going to be joining us, and then we can draft the agreements and we'll form a new company. Will do the operating agreements and consulting agreements and all those things to get the celebrity, part of the company, and then all of the things that they have to do, because usually there's basically a services agreement component, all the things that they have to do for that equity and like a vesting schedule and all those things. So we'll do all of those things, and then other times the brand's like, hey, we need a spokesperson agreement for, an influencer or a celebrity, and we'll just draft that up. The other thing we do oftentimes with celebrities is we'll do training, right? So we'll basically run through like Alcohol Beverage Law 101, focusing a lot on the social media do's and don'ts, because that's a big part of what they usually do. And then some of the things that they should and shouldn't say in the press and just like, out and about as it relates to the brand. Because once they're associated with the brand, it all ties back to the brand, right? So they can't just go and, do illegal activities and assume it has nothing to do with the brand at that point. So just educating them on kind of the basics of the alcohol industry.
Right. Well, that's just a small piece of what you do. I know we have a lot of things we've talked about offline that I have dreams and aspirations of, shaking up this industry, and we'll get to that eventually, because hopefully in 2026 I'll have something to announce. But in the interim, you also have developed something very innovative and helpful for our industry, an app, right? Can you tell the name and talk about it and tell everybody on Sippin and Selling how to download it?
Sure. So it's called Set the Bar. You can go to setthebarapp.com, or you can go to the App Store for Apple. And the idea was that for so many years I was developing these, basically it's literally a Word document for every state that clients would ask me to come up with that had the basic trade packs like tastings on and off premise, displays, signage, sweepstakes, charitable donations, consumer specialties, retail all those like sort of basics that everybody in the state needs to know. But no one was largely looking at the Word documents, because the sales and marketing people would be running around the town and they would be like, I'm never going to pull up like a Word document, right?
Right.
So I developed an app that's a separate business, but I own it and oversee everything, where you can, on your phone, go to every state, check what the rules are. It's in an easy to read, user-friendly way. So it's like you can do it green, you can't do it red, like green, yellow, red light.
Okay.
And then if you want more, you can read more, and it has like, easy to read, non-lawyery, legalese way.
Dumbed down version for people like
explain-
myself.
Yeah, to explain like what you can and cannot do in that state. So we have people who use it, and it's much easier, and it also helps because of not only to give you the information, but one of the things we always tell clients to do is to train their sales and marketing people at least yearly. So we'll do trainings, and then this is a way also for them to have access to that information. Okay. So if there's ever a regulatory, enforcement action, violation, investigation, what have you, if there was an illegal thing that happened, it's a great mitigating factor to be to the state or the TTB. We trained them on such and such a date. They signed off that they were trained. They have access to all of the information. They know they can't go do a credit card swipe. They know they can't do whatever. They did it anyway, so it was clearly a bad apple and not a company policy or mandate. So take it easy on us. So
Right.
there's a few different reasons for it, and I think that it goes a long way to mitigate investigations.
Absolutely. You touched on a lot of things that give me a little bit of deja vu from back in the day. There's some things about the industry. Obviously, it's ever changing, ever evolving. But reason I moved down to Florida originally was for free goods. I don't know what brought you down here to open your practice down here, but for me, my father shipped me off here because back in the day, it was the Wild West, and you could sell in a case of X and you can gift a case of Y. And it was really fun for me because at the time I was selling cordials, and it was a spritz cocktail was our signature drink. So my father also was an importer of a Prosecco. So my drink of choice was all over everybody's bars and everybody's menus, and that was because I was giving out 12 bottles of free goods. And, people love that because they didn't have to necessarily use it just in my cocktails. Every brunch uses Prosecco. So that was really nice. Always there's laws changing. We touched on cannabis. I want to go deeper with that. But what's a law that you find that changed recently or not that you just feel like is just so silly? Or maybe not. Maybe you don't think it's silly and you think it's amazing and it should have been active a long time ago. But that's one for me. I find that, that was fun times and it was helpful because a lot of people don't have the budget to keep up, right? They don't have a celebrity endorsement. So for me, being a small business owner, that was my edge. So.
Well, I came down to Florida from New York because my wife's from Miami. So we moved down here. And she has, as you know, public relations practice in the industry.
Yeah, shout out Annette.
To Culture-Wise Collective. But I still think, to some extent, Miami in particular is the Wild West. Just a quick aside, I was on a sales call, or not a sales call, but distributor ride-along, basically, and we went into an account, and they introduced me as a company lawyer for the brand I was with, and the restaurant owner was like, listen, if you pay us $2,500 right now, I'll go upstairs and I'll change our digital menu to add you guys to the menu. That's like how we operate. And I'm just like, that's
I know,
that's a little
bonkers.
crazy. Not only was I introduced as like the company lawyer, and I was like, I didn't say anything, but I'm like, maybe you'd have a little bit of caution if you're, trying to get an illegal sliding fee.
Miami. They're like, we know so-and-so. Like, what?
So, those things still happen. But obviously the brand I was with said no, hard pass. But anyway, one of the laws that I think, I'm counsel for American Craft Spirits Association, so we have been pushing, along with Discus for many years, to get DTC passed.
Okay.
It's not in Florida yet, and one of the things about Florida that I find bizarre is they have this rule for craft distillers that doesn't allow a craft distiller to be owned by basically a major supplier. So if you open a craft distiller in Florida, craft distillery, and you grow it and it's doing great, and then Pernod or Diageo or whoever wants to buy you, or Bacardi, they can't sell it and still retain all of the rights and benefits of being a craft distiller.
Right.
So I find that a little bit, bizarre about Florida, and hopefully also will represent the Florida Craft Spirits Association. That's another area where I try to help the industry, and I think that law in Florida should hopefully be changed. But the DTC push, like New York passed DTC for spirits.
Right.
Wine can obviously ship DTC in almost every state. And for small guys like you and I represent, if you're in Florida or New York or wherever, you don't have the money or bandwidth or, desire necessarily to sell from Florida to California, let's say. Mm-hmm. But if you can get a subscription program or you can get fans in California, then maybe you do open it, right? Because you see like all these people are from California ordering your product for whatever reason, so maybe it's a good market to open. Or maybe it's not, right? Because nobody orders, but they're all ordering from New York.
Right.
And I think it really changes the game for craft distillers to be able to open up an additional revenue stream. So I'd like to see that more across the board for everybody.
I like that. That's a great answer. All right, so we're talking about the spirits industry, and obviously I have an interest invested in that category, but I do want to hear about the cannabis, CBD, THC laws that you are, finagling around nowadays, only because my father came out with Cask 420 hemp-infused rum. And I talked about it on the last episode, how he wanted to have sativa in it and have psychoactive effects. And he's like, it's great, it's legalized, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, it's not. Obviously, he was a little bit ahead of himself. And I said to him, listen, we got to be compliant. Obviously, it's not going to get passed by the TTV, regardless of what recipes you want to throw out there and be this wizard in the kitchen. But he just did hemp flavoring, and we got it approved. It's great. It's just a spiced rum. It's not going to do a dual issue for your brain. So I was just like wondering, what are some of the brands that you're seeing going into that space? Obviously, there's got to be different laws, and it's very different category for most brands, right? Because they can cross over or cross through, but there has to be a shift, obviously, in the ingredients and maybe packaging and what they have to put on the label. Do you have clients currently that you're working with in that space, and what is the differences in the legalities?
Yeah, I've been practicing cannabis law for like seven or more years, so it's been a while, and it was very, very hot 7, 8, 9 years ago with people jumping into the space. Of late, marijuana specifically has not been as popular as hemp-derived products. So the difference, I think, just to explain to listeners, is the cannabis plan, the cannabis sativa L plan, has two parts, right? The hemp part, which is the part that's legal under the Farm Bill, and then the part that's regulated federally or illegal federally, and they have in, obviously, dispensary stores, medical or rec, or adult use on the marijuana side. So the TTB has a hemp policy that allows you to put like hemp seed oil and hemp seeds into alcohol beverage products, and you have to follow a particular process and formula approval, and you give lab results and all that stuff to make sure that it obviously doesn't have
Psychoactive effects.
yeah, and significant THC, et cetera. So that part is fine, but they certainly will not let you put in a marijuana product into a alcohol product, and they even have rules around like it can't have a marijuana leaf or whatever and suggest. There are some labels, if you look at them, that, kind of are
Floral.
close.
We're very floral.
Yeah. Some will get close, right? And obviously if you get approval, great. Then the other products are, and years ago we had many clients who were trying to do crossover. Like I think PBR did a good one. I don't know if it's still around. Obviously they have the beer, and then they did a cannabis seltzer that was sold in dispensaries, I think in California. So that was a good example of a crossover where it was the same brand. But otherwise now we work with brands who are hemp-derived THC, which is synthesized, and that's obviously the area I think you're talking about well, which has been very hot. But there's been a lot of action in different states trying to regulate it because it's right now legal under a loophole because it's synthesized THC. Like nobody, I don't think, thought about it years ago when CBD was even popular, that you'd be able to synthesize this much THC from the hemp plant. And so the federal government there was the possibility of that getting closed. It didn't get closed, and now states are kind of closed that loophole in some cases not. So, if you're going to do it, do it now.
It's murky waters. I've talked about it a little bit, that in Texas in particular, they were pulling a couple SKUs for different reasons, but mostly was there weren't age statements on it. So that's not great. And obviously, it's just a new time. Our industry always goes through these ebbs and flows of innovation. And sometimes, it sucks to be the first one because then, you kind of have to get slapped or pushed aside and, you did it first and you kind of have to ride the wave and wait and see if you last or not. And I feel like there's some brands out there that want to win that category and a lot of chains that want to partner with them, which is great, but it is also taking a lot of space away from the hero brands prior, which were the RTD category. That's really what was the last splash, in my opinion, to shake us up. And obviously COVID helped with that. I wanted to also talk to you a little bit more about, since your background is so extensive and you have an impressive pedigree, I wanted to hear if you had any funny stories that maybe you could share about being in this field. And you don't have to name names of brands, and maybe it has nothing to do with the spirits industry, just being in law. But I'm sure you have something funny that you could share with our listeners.
Well, I think that, again, going back to the slotting fee guy in Miami, I always think that that's a good example I always give for, staff training and stuff like that, because it's just so, off the wall. But I think the more exciting stories are probably when I was a prosecutor, just because of, being Manhattan and the nature of like running around,
Yeah, absolutely.
saving people and whatnot. But I think that there was one case where this doctor couldn't get a credit card. She had like a lot of money in the bank, but literally couldn't get a credit card because this woman stole her identity for like 15 years.
Wow.
And so she had like cable bills and credit cards, and like every time she moved, she would just like steal her identity immediately. And this doctor was just like going crazy because this woman was stealing her identity for so many years. And finally we caught her and put it all together. But my favorite story probably is one where I went to the gym in New York, and I realized, like, I got a thing from my phone. It's like, hey, did you go to, I don't know, whatever, Walgreens and spend $300? And I was like, no, I was just at the gym. So being a prosecutor at the time, I realized one of my credit cards was taken from my wallet, but I didn't know because like I wasn't like, my wallet was still there. So I went to a detective and we figured it out. I got subpoenas for the cameras at the gym. We got subpoenas for the images in the video from where they used my credit card at the Walgreens or whatever it was. They bought a bunch of cigarettes. And we ended up finding the guy, and he was part of like a huge ring that was stealing people's credit cards. And we ended up bringing the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it was like, I don't know how many people, 10, 15, 20 people that we took down, all because this guy took one credit card from the wrong person. I was like, hell no.
Not me.
Not me. I'm in the wrong job for you to have stolen my credit card. Let's take this guy down. So I always love that because it was just like, wrong person, buddy.
Wrong person. That's karma for you. I mean, how funny is that? I love a good karma story. I'm so about that. I believe in that. I don't know if you do. I mean, maybe it's a chick thing, but that's pretty funny. That's a pretty funny story for sure. I definitely have had some crazy identity theft, similar stories, not physically taking, but I had this crazy thing happen to my father recently. He was getting taunted, which is so messed up because my dad's 88, as you guys know. And he was getting taunted where someone basically had targeted him. He wanted to put up Cast 420 ads on Facebook because, that's what you do to help move the needle. And he must have shown his credit card, like taken a physical image of the credit card and his ID, which again, everybody listening out there, it's so messed up to do to old people. It's just like such elder abuse. And he was messing with my father, somehow cracked into his email, was emailing anybody with my dad's last name. So I still have an email address with Ballin attached. Emails me basically saying, if you don't send me, I don't even think it was $10,000. I think it was like $200. If you don't send me $200, I'm going to release all these awful images of your father. I'm like, what images?
Right,
like, come on, like of his food. Like he likes to take pictures of his meals and send it to us, or bottles of, alcohol. It was so bizarre though. He went for months. He was emailing my husband, my nephew, everybody. It was crazy. And then I did call the police and have them come to the house and do an investigation thoroughly. We found out that it was someone that was just, like a bot, and it was so crazy.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he had me involved where I was like, what are you doing? Don't send this person money. Don't do what they're saying. But it's just so crazy. I mean, nowadays, technology can be scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, so crazy. There's so many wackos out there. But I just wanted to talk to you. Like I said, there's a lot of knowledge. We could probably have a series on beverage alcohol legalities and so many different things that people don't think about that are coming to market with a new brand or that are out there currently trying to broker a deal with a distributor or a celebrity or anything like that. I just would love to hear maybe 2 things that you think are very important that people, you find it's a repetitive thing they forget or they don't think about.
Yeah. So there's a few actually. I'll give you 3. One's the easiest probably, especially for celebrity clients, is there's a lot of ADA compliance plaintiffs lawyers who will look at celebrities. It could be other websites too, and it tap into other brands, but celebrities seem to be like the target for whatever reason, and sue the brand for not having an ADA compliant website, regardless of whether or not it could be successful. All they want is between, depending on the state, maybe $5,000, $10,000 to $15,000 to settle it. And it's a super easy fix that brands should just talk to their web folks about to just add it. It's a couple $100s a year. So that's one thing that I think, for whatever reason, continues every few months. Yeah. The other thing is distribution agreements and co-pack agreements. Distribution agreements, you had mentioned when you started control states, also, but I think franchise states are probably the one that people, when they go into new states, sometimes forget.
Okay.
So they'll go and they'll sign up and they'll be like, yeah, we're going to start selling to, Georgia or, wherever. That's a franchise state. Nevada, we got into Vegas. That's awesome. We're, at this club at whatever. And now they're stuck and they want to expand and they want to do a deal with, Breakthrough or Southern RDC or whatever. And they can't get out because they sold without a good contract. So we spend a lot of time on distribution agreements and trying to analyze what the best way to get out is, because it's like a, it's like a prenup basically, right?
Absolutely. An expensive one at that.
So that's really important. And then especially with the rise of RTDs, there's a lot of co-pack issues that we've been dealing with lately. And because of the cans, right? So is it the liner? Is there too much alcohol that the liner dissolves and it becomes gross when you drink it? Does the cans get crushed because they didn't put the label on right? There's all these different things. And as the brand owner, you're not usually distilling it. So you're like, well, I didn't do anything. But they'll look at the the co-packer will look at the can manufacturer, the label manufacturer, and everybody. And you as the brand are like, well, I didn't do anything. So why am I responsible? So you really need to spend time thinking through those contracts, because it can be really, confusing at the end of the day if there's an issue for everybody to figure out who's responsible.
Yeah, those are great tips. Thank you so much, Ryan, for filling all my guests, my audience in and being my guest, because I feel like this is a wealth of knowledge that people out there need to know. And I appreciate you sharing it with them. Before we end, I always ask everybody what their favorite drink is, but I'm going to put a little twist on it for you, especially because, I got dressed up for the occasion. What's your most lawyered up cocktail?
My most lawyered up cocktail.
You like that, huh?
I would say that the things I drink the most are Negronis and Mezcal.
Okay. How do you like to drink your Negronis? Do you like an ice block, the square?
Negronis on the rocks.
Okay.
It could be big or, doesn't matter, but not in a martini glass.
Okay.
And I also find that you can test a bar or restaurant on its Negroni. So I really get annoyed when people start free pouring it and they're just, not following the very specific recipe.
For sure.
And if it's a good Negroni, it's going to be a good, a steak restaurant. You're just like, no, this is going to be a great restaurant because the Negroni is good. And if it's shitty, then you're like, I don't know.
You're like, I ain't coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
I love those cocktails. Obviously, they're not so much in my wheelhouse because I like more of the chick cocktails or just a straight tequila. I want to thank Ryan Malkin from Malkin Law for being my guest today on Sippin and Selling. It's been so much fun celebrating our birthdays together. I love being here with you. Thank you for my new swag. If anybody wants a hat, can they get it on your website?
They can email me or reach out on my website.
Email Ryan if you want a cool hat like he gifted me. And I'll see you guys next week on my next episode of Sippin and Selling. Take care.